Well, let's head over to Metro Airport where there are new concerns about what you're paying when you book a flight on Delta. The airline is starting to use artificial intelligence to set ticket prices. Delta says it plans to use AI to set 20% of its prices by the end of the year. Currently, 3% of the airline's prices are set by AI. Last week, three senators sent a letter to Delta raising concerns about privacy and fare increases. For its part, Delta says dynamic pricing has been in use for more than 3 decades based on customer demand. Delta also says AI can adapt to market conditions in real time. In a statement, the airline also said, quote, "There is no fare product Delta has ever used, is testing, or plans to use that targets customers with individualized offers based on personal income or otherwise." So, what does all of this mean for you when you actually try to book a ticket? For that, we're turning to Lindsay Owens. She's the executive director of the economic think tank Groundwork Collaborative. She is also an expert on dynamic pricing powers and price gouging. Thank you so much for joining us. What in the world does this mean?
Oh man, this was a doozy. So a couple of weeks ago, we learned that Delta had partnered with a new artificial intelligence company out of Israel called Fetcher to start piloting some new pricing on Delta plane tickets. Right now, we think that they're using this new technology for about 3% of fares, but they announced that by the end of the year, they want to see this technology rolled out on 20% of tickets. So what does it all mean? Dynamic pricing has been around for decades in the airline industry. This is why it's so frustrating to buy plane tickets. When the number of seats on the plane declines, the price goes up. If you purchase closer to your travel date, you're not sure when you want to leave, or you have to book an emergency flight, you're going to pay more. We've all experienced this. The big concern coming out of the announcement last week was that they may be taking this to a new level. We know from Fetcher's materials on their website that they offer something that looks like truly personalized pricing. So this means that prices would be set not just based on how many seats are left on the plane, but rather that prices would be set potentially based on characteristics of the consumer. So things like your past flight history. If you always travel somewhere for Christmas and they know that, they could potentially ratchet the price up because they know you're probably going to go regardless of the price. So this was the big concern coming out of Delta's announcement with Fetcher. Interestingly, that material on Fetcher's website about personalized pricing has now been removed. And Delta is now denying that they are going to price tickets in this way. But it was a very concerning announcement, and I think a harbinger of what's to come, which is more confusing and opaque pricing for customers who are traveling this summer and into the future.
So, is there any chance that we could see some benefits from this, or is this only going to raise prices for us?
Yeah, sure. Of course, the same technology that's being used to very quickly ratchet up prices could also be used to drive them down and offer you discounts. But I'll tell you, if you look at the phone calls that Delta is having with their investors, their earnings calls, what we learned is that mostly what we've been seeing from Fetcher is price hikes. The CEO talked about being able to price $20 and $40 more than they used to. And they also said the results of their pilot with Fetcher have been amazingly favorable in driving up revenues. And so I think the punchline here is that we're much more likely to see fare price increases than discounts when these new technologies are rolled out. But I think we're also much more likely just to see varying prices. One day it's one price, the next day it's another price. It's going to make it harder and harder to comparison shop, harder to plan, because there's going to be no predictability in prices, because AI pricing is going to mean that prices are changing second by second.
So, we know because Delta made the announcement, but have you heard any other conversations about other airlines doing something similar?
Yeah, look, companies are rolling out AI to assist with all sorts of things. A couple of months ago, we heard that Hertz was going to be using AI cameras to track for scratches on your rental car. So instead of pulling out that little golf pencil and marking where the scratches are and then coming back and having someone check where the scratches are, they're going to take pictures of your car on the way out and pictures of your car on the way in. Now, this is convenient, right? It's a lot easier to just drive through and get a camera shot taken than it is to have to look around your car. But what we've learned already from these announcements is that there are going to be a lot of false positives. The cameras are sometimes going to see scratches where there aren't scratches. And as a result, consumers are going to be charged for damages that they don't owe. So across the board, AI is going to be assisting companies, in all sorts of ways, but it's also going to be tough for consumers as well.
Yeah. Okay, Lindsay, we're going to take a short 90-second break here. When we come back, I want to pick your brain a little bit more.
Okay, great.
Thanks. Welcome back to Local 4 Live. Back now with Lindsay Owens, the executive director of the economic think tank Groundwork Collaborative. She's also an expert on dynamic pricing. Lindsay, okay, so obviously AI can be used in almost anything now. Is there anything that we as the consumer can do to maybe trick AI and get a better price?
Yeah, this is a great question. I will tell you, my bias here is that the onus should not be on us as consumers to figure out how to beat the robot. This is why our lawmakers and our policymakers exist, to regulate markets so that we have a level playing field and so that consumers aren't exposed to unfair and deceptive and opaque pricing practices or other consumer practices in the retail setting.
Yeah.
So I really think the job here is for lawmakers in Congress, but also folks at the Federal Trade Commission. This is the entity in Washington that is supposed to regulate consumer practices, to take a close look at artificial intelligence practices and make sure the rules of the road are such that consumers get a fair shake, but frankly, also so that companies do too. We don't want the big companies who have access to these technologies snuffing out little companies. We want fair competition in the marketplace, and we want consumers to be able to comparison shop and get a good deal. So I'm not a big fan of putting the onus on consumers. But I think, of course, in the airline setting with pricing, there have always been opportunities to try to get a good deal. You can fly more flexibly if you're willing to depart a little later than you want or a little earlier than you want. You might be able to get a slightly better deal than if your travel dates aren't quite as flexible.
Right. There's always been the tips about try to book your flight on an early Tuesday morning or use incognito mode so they can't track, how you're comparing prices on different flights. With AI now being used, does any of that matter?
I think it's going to be virtually impossible. If you look at Fetcher's website, one of the big things that they brag about is increasing variability of flight prices. So whereas before pricing might have varied a few times a day, they're looking at pricing varying by the nanosecond. So I think it is going to be increasingly difficult for consumers to outrun the computer, no matter if you're willing to wake up at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning and hang upside down and do whatever else you need to do to try to get a good deal on a flight.
This has got to be extremely frustrating. Okay, so before I let you go, any advice if I'm just the run-of-the-mill, average flyer, or maybe I fly 2 times a year, is there anything I can do, or do I just have to suck this up?
I mean, look, booking in advance is going to be your best bet. With truly dynamic pricing, as the number of seats on the plane decreases, as supply is constrained, prices are going to go up. So the earlier you book, the better able you are going to be to take advantage of more seat options and better pricing.
Gotcha. Okay, well, book early, plan your trip, and just tell your family and friends reunion is happening on Saturday, regardless if they want you to be there or not.
Yeah, that works.
Lindsay, thank you so much for your time this morning.